The rust-red dust of Tartarus 7 settled on everything, a fine grit that worked its way into engine manifolds, nutrient paste, and the very marrow of a man's bones. Kalen was a child of that dust, born in the shadow of the great orbital scrapyards known to the wider galaxy as the Graveyard of Empires. Here, the colossal wrecks of forgotten wars and fallen fleets drifted in a slow, silent ballet of decay. For the established powers of the Galactic Concordat, it was a dumping ground. For humanity, it was a prison and a proving ground. Kalen, like every other human scraping a life from the metal carcasses, was a scavenger. He piloted the stray dog, a rust bucket hauler held together by spit, prayer, and the masterful welding of his only crewmate, a grizzled old spacer named Jax. Their days were a monotonous cycle of risk and reward, cutting through the twisted guts of dead cruisers to rip out functioning power conduits or guidance modules, all while dodging Concordat patrols that enforced the technological limitation accords with brutal efficiency. The Accords were the chains around humanity's neck, a set of laws passed after the disastrous Outer Rim Rebellion a century ago, forbidding humans from owning or developing technology beyond a certain grade. It kept them primitive, dependent, and perpetually poor, vassals in their own star system. Today was a bad day. The stray dog's sensors were screaming about a gravitic shear just off their port bow, a common hazard in the graveyard where dying warp cores bled exotic energies into the void. Worse, a Concordat patrol frigate, a sleek Vthar-class ship that looked like a shard of obsidian, was sweeping the sector. Kale, they're pinging us. Jax's voice crackled over the intercom, thick with the weariness of a man who'd seen too many good days turn sour. Standard Accord compliance check. They want our manifest and our reactor output logs. Kalen's hands tightened on the controls, the worn plastic groaning in protest. Their reactor was illegally modified, overclocked just to give the stray dog enough thrust to haul a profitable load. If the Vthar patrol got a whiff of it, their ship would be impounded and they'd be sent to the vanadium mines on Cinder 3, a life sentence in all but name. Stall them, Jax. Tell them our comms array is acting up because of the shear. He scanned his own console, his eyes darting over the holographic debris field. They were deep in the Whispering Labyrinth, a particularly dense and chaotic section of the graveyard where sensor ghosts were common. It was their only advantage. I'm looking for a bolt hole, something big enough to hide this rust bucket in. His screen flickered, highlighting a massive object nearby, far larger than the usual destroyer husks or cruiser skeletons. It was an anomaly, a wreck so ancient its energy signature was almost zero, a dead spot in the fabric of space. The Concordat's advanced sensors likely filtered it out as a rogue asteroid or a chunk of stellar debris. Got one. Kalen breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. It's a big one. Jax. Looks like a precursor derelict. Never seen anything like it. Jax's reply was a string of curses. Precursor ships were the ghosts of the graveyard, vessels from a civilization that had vanished eons before humanity had even discovered fire. They were legends, boogeymen. Most were thought to be inert, their technologies so alien and advanced that they were indistinguishable from cosmic radiation, but they were also notoriously unstable. You're crazy, kid. Those things are tombs. They bleed radiation, warp space-time, and are rumored to drive men mad. It's either the tomb or the mines. Kalen snapped back, already nudging the stray dog towards the colossal shadow. I'll take my chances with the ghosts. The derelict was a Titan, a vessel shaped less like a ship and more like a weaponized mountain. Its hull was a seamless expanse of a material that wasn't metal or ceramic, but something that seemed to drink the light. A matte black surface covered in geometric patterns that defied Euclidean logic. As the stray dog drew closer, its own lights barely illuminated the sheer scale of the thing. It was at least 10 kilometers long. A silent, sleeping leviathan. Kalen found what he was looking for, a gaping wound in the ship's flank. A cavernous hangar bay that had been ripped open by some ancient, unimaginable force. He expertly guided his smaller vessel into the darkness, the patrol frigate's comms requests fading behind them as they passed into the shadow of the giant. The moment they were inside, the world went silent. The ship's interior seemed to absorb all sound and energy. The gravitic shear outside vanished from their sensors, and the Vthar ship's pings ceased. They were hidden. For a long moment, the only sound was the thrum of the stray dog's life support. "Well," Jack said, his voice unusually subdued as he entered the cramped cockpit. "We're in." Now what Kalen stared out of the viewport at the vast, cavernous space around them. The hangar was large enough to hold a dozen ships their size. Strange, angular support struts crisscrossed the ceiling, and the deck was littered with the dust of ages. "Now we wait for them to leave," he said. But his curiosity was a fire he couldn't extinguish. This was the find of a lifetime, a ship from a mythical age, untouched, unseen. The Accords be damned. He had to know what was inside. They spent the next cycle in a state of tense anticipation, monitoring the Concordat Patrol's movements. The Vthar ship swept the area for another hour before, seemingly satisfied, it jumped to another sector. They were safe for now. "All right, let's see what we're sitting in," Kalen said, pulling on a worn envirosuit. Jax grumbled but followed suit. "Just a quick look. We grab what we can. Something valuable enough to get us off Tartarus 7 for good. And we get out before this tomb collapses on us." The air inside the precursor ship was thin but breathable, with a strange metallic tang, like ozone after a lightning strike. The gravity was artificially maintained, a steady 1G that felt unnervingly normal. The interior architecture was as alien as the hull, all sharp angles, sweeping curves, and corridors that seemed to twist in impossible ways. There were no lights, but a faint, silvery luminescence emanated from the walls themselves, casting long, distorted shadows. They found no bodies, no signs of the crew, only a profound and unsettling emptiness. The technology they passed was baffling. Consoles made of a crystalline substance that pulsed with a soft inner light. Doorways that shimmered like heat haze and opened into rooms that seemed larger on the inside than the outside. "This is beyond anything the Concordat has," Jax whispered, his usual cynicism replaced by a raw, childlike awe. "The Accords didn't just hold us back. Cull, they blinded us. We've been fighting over scraps while this—" He gestured at a conduit humming with contained energy, "was sleeping right on our doorstep." Their exploration eventually led them to what could only be the ship's bridge. It was a vast, amphitheater-like space, dominated by a single command throne that overlooked a panoramic view screen currently showing nothing but the star-dusted blackness of space. As Kalen approached the throne, the crystalline consoles around the room flickered to life. A voice, ancient and resonant, echoed in his mind, not through his ears. It wasn't a language of words, but of pure concept, of raw data flowing directly into his consciousness. Identity required, it seemed to say. Command authorization protocols engaged. Kalen froze, his hand hovering over the throne's armrest. Jax backed away, his face pale. Kid, don't touch anything. Let's go. This is bad mojo. But it was too late. Kalen's instincts, the same ones that helped him navigate the treacherous debris fields, told him this was a pivotal moment. He placed his hand on the cool, smooth surface of the throne. The ship responded instantly. The mental voice intensified, a flood of information overwhelming him, star charts of galaxies he'd never heard of, weapons schematics that defied the known laws of physics, tactical logs of a war fought against an enemy that consumed stars. He saw the ship's name, not in letters, but as a feeling, a concept of finality and retribution, the Nemesis. He felt its last moments, its crew sacrificing themselves to detonate a weapon that tore a hole in reality, crippling their foe, but flinging their vessel, damaged and powerless, across unimaginable distances and time to finally rest here. In this forgotten boneyard, the ship wasn't dead, it was dormant, its systems in a state of deep hibernation, waiting for a compatible intelligence to awaken it. Humanity, it turned out, shared a distant but discernible genetic marker with the precursors, just enough for the ship's systems to recognize him as a potential operator. The bridge came alive. The main view screen shimmered, displaying a tactical overview of the graveyard. It showed the stray dog nestled in the hangar, and then, with terrifying clarity, it highlighted 3 Vthar patrol frigates closing in on their position. "They're back," Jax yelled, pointing at the screen. "And they brought friends." How did they find us? The voice in Kalen's head provided the answer. His activation of the bridge had sent out a microscopic pulse of energy, a ripple in space-time, insignificant to most, but to the Concordate's advanced sensors, it was a beacon. The Nemesis was still mostly powerless, its main reactor offline, its weapons cold, but the throne was channeling a sliver of auxiliary power through him, through his own bioelectric field. The mental voice offered him a choice, a single option. A weapon system, a point defense cannon, could be brought online using this residual power, but firing it would drain the last of the ship's accessible energy reserves and scream his existence to the entire galaxy. It was a one-shot, all-or-nothing gamble. Outside, the Concordate frigates were taking up attack formation. A harsh, metallic voice boomed over a wide-band frequency, powerful enough to penetrate the Nemesis's hull. "Unidentified vessel, you are in violation of Concordate Accords. You are harboring a fugitive human vessel. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction." Kalen looked at Jax, whose face was a mask of terror and resignation. He saw the vanadium mines, a lifetime of brutal labor in the dark. He felt the centuries of humiliation, of humanity being treated as galactic refuse. And then he felt the power of the Nemesis thrumming beneath his hand, a promise of something more, something terrible and great. He turned his gaze to the view screen, his eyes hardening into chips of flint. He focused his will, his intent, and gave the ship a single, silent command. Fire. Time seemed to stutter. For an infinitesimal moment after Kalen gave the command, nothing happened. The 3 Vthar frigates continued their arrogant, predatory advance, their forms silhouetted against the swirling nebula of the outer rim. Then, A section of the Nemesis's mountainous hull slid open with impossible silence, revealing an aperture that was not a gun barrel, but a perfect circle of absolute blackness. It did not glow or charge. It simply was. A lance of non-light, a sliver of pure void, erupted from the circle. It moved faster than thought, not as a projectile, but as an instantaneous extension of the ship itself. It didn't strike the lead frigate. It unmade it. One moment, the sleek, concordant warship was there, its shields shimmering with latent power. The next, it was gone, its atoms unwoven and scattered into the vacuum without a flash of light or a whisper of energy. The void lance retracted as silently as it had appeared. The two remaining frigates, their crews likely screaming in a mixture of terror and disbelief, broke formation. One tried to jump to warp, its engines flaring brightly. The other opened fire, its plasma cannon spitting incandescent rage at the unmoving precursor behemoth. The plasma bolts, each capable of slagging a city block, splashed against the Nemesis's hull and were simply absorbed, vanishing without a sizzle or a scorch mark. Before the first frigate could complete its jump calculations, a second lance of void erupted, this time bisecting the ship with surgical precision. The two halves drifted apart, their inner decks exposed to space in a silent, horrific cross-section of a dying vessel. The last frigate, its captain clearly choosing survival over valor, managed to execute an emergency slipspace jump, vanishing in a tear of distorted space-time. And then, silence returned. The entire engagement had lasted less than 10 seconds. Aboard the Nemesis bridge, the aftermath was just as profound. The faint luminescence of the walls faded to a dull, lifeless gray. The crystalline consoles went dark. The voice in Kalen's head vanished, leaving behind an echoing void and a migraine that felt like a drill boring through his skull. He slumped back in the command throne, gasping, a cold sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. The sliver of power was gone. The ship was truly inert now. A tomb, once more. Gods above. Kale. What did you do? Jax's voice was a strained whisper from across the bridge. He was staring at the view screen, where the two halves of a Vithar frigate tumbled slowly through the debris field of their former flagship. Kalen pushed himself out of the throne, his legs unsteady. The flood of precursor knowledge hadn't just been a data dump, it had rewired something in his brain. He still felt the echoes of it, the ghost of a perception that saw not just 3 dimensions of space, but the flowing currents of space-time itself. He understood, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the weapon hadn't just destroyed those ships. It had erased their very existence from the timeline for a few microseconds. A violation of causality so profound that the universe had simply filled in the gap with vacuum. "I woke it up," Kalen said, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. "And then I put it back to sleep." He ran a hand over a dead console. The ship felt different now. Not just an empty vessel, but a sleeping giant whose dreams he had briefly touched. He could feel its core systems, its dormant heart, a colossal sphere of contained singularity that was cold and silent. "That shot," Jax stammered. "That energy signature. Kyle, the entire Concordate fleet is going to come down on this sector. They'll send dreadnoughts. They'll send everything they have." Kalen nodded, his mind already racing, piecing together the fragmented tactical knowledge the ship had given him. They will. But they won't know exactly what they're looking for. The energy reading would have been bizarre, off the known spectrum. They'll think it was a stellar phenomenon, a weapon test by a rival power, anything but the truth. It gives us time, not much, but some. He walked towards the bridge entrance, his steps more certain now. He wasn't just a scavenger anymore. The man who had entered the ship was gone. In his place was something new, something forged in the mental fire of a forgotten age. They returned to the stray dog, the familiar grime and cramped quarters of their own ship, a strange comfort after the sterile, alien grandeur of the Nemesis. As soon as they sealed the airlock, Kalen went to the engineering console. Jax watched him, a wary look in his eyes. "What's the plan?" "Kyle, we're stuck in a dead ship that just painted a target on this entire system." Cullen didn't look up from the screen. He was cross-referencing the stray dog's primitive schematics with the vast architectural knowledge now seared into his memory. The Nemesis isn't dead. Its main reactor is intact, but its ignition system is fried, and the primary fuel catalyst decayed over the millennia. It needs a jump-start, a new heart, or at least a powerful defibrillator. He brought up a star chart of the graveyard, zooming in on a sector known as the Anvil, a hazardous region where the Concordat brought captured ships for decommissioning, according to the Nemesis's deep-range scans, taken moments before it went dormant again. There's a Concordat decommissioning station less than a day's burn from here. Station Epsilon 9. They use a contained microsingularity to power their plasma cutters, the ones they use to slice capital ships apart. It's crude. A child's toy compared to the Nemesis's core, but the power regulation unit, it's compatible. We can adapt it to initiate the Nemesis's startup sequence. Jax's jaw dropped. You want to raid a Concordat black site, a heavily armed station in the most patrolled sector of the graveyard. We just saw what their frigates can do. And you want to knock on the front door of their workshop. Kalen finally turned, and the look in his eyes made Jax take an involuntary step back. It was a cold, calculating intensity he'd never seen before. "We're not knocking. We're going in quiet. We have an advantage they don't know about." Over the next few hours, Kalen directed Jax in a series of modifications to the stray dog that felt like sacrilege. Following Kalen's precise instructions, they cannibalized several small, non-essential components from a derelict fighter craft in the Nemesis's hangar. Under his guidance, Jax, a master mechanic, jury-rigged a sensor baffle system using precursor alloys that Kalen identified. It was a passive stealth system designed not to make them invisible, but to make their ship's energy signature appear identical to 1,000 other pieces of drifting debris. It was a trick the Nemesis had logged from an extinct race of stellar predators. With the modifications complete, they carefully piloted the stray dog out of the silent Leviathan and back into the void. The graveyard felt different now, more menacing. Every shadow seemed to hold a Concordat patrol, but Kalen's newfound senses, and intuition backed by the ship's passive knowledge, allowed him to navigate the debris fields with an almost supernatural grace, finding cold corridors and sensor shadows that kept them hidden. They were an hour out from Station Epsilon 9 when their proximity alert blared. 3 ships, closing fast. They weren't Concordat. Their energy signatures were a chaotic mess of jury-rigged reactors and mismatched weapon systems. Scavengers. Or pirates. "They're hailing us," Jax said, his hand hovering over the weapons console. On the main screen, the face of a woman appeared. She was sharp-featured, with cybernetic eyes that glowed a faint blue and a web of faded tattoos covering one side of her face. She sat in the command chair of a bridge that was as cluttered and functional as their own. Behind her, a dozen hardened crew members stood ready. Stray dog. The woman's voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of steel. You're running dark, and you're a long way from the usual scrap heaps. Cut your engines. My name is Anya, and my fleet would like a word. Kalen looked at their tactical display. The 3 ships had them bracketed. They were outgunned and outnumbered. Powering down. He replied, his own voice steady. What do you want? Anya. Her cybernetic eyes seemed to narrow, analyzing him. An hour ago, 3 concordate frigates vanished off the grid in this sector. Moments later, a neutrino burst unlike anything ever recorded lit up our long-range sensors, originating from your general location. You were the only ship in the vicinity running silent. So, I'll ask again. What word do you have for me? This was it. The first test. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not all of it. But he couldn't lie either. Her crew. This fleet. They were like him. Humans pushed to the edge, surviving on scraps and hate. They were potential enemies, but they were also potential allies. We found something, Kalen said slowly, choosing his words with care. Something old, something powerful. A murmur went through Anya's bridge crew. She silenced them with a raised hand. Scavenger stories. The graveyard is full of them. I'm not interested in ghost stories. I'm interested in why the Concordat is scrambling every patrol wing from here to the core. Kalen leaned forward, letting the camera catch the cold fire in his eyes. Because for the first time in 100 years, they're scared. They lost 3 warships in 10 seconds. Anya, not crippled, not defeated, lost, wiped from existence. And the thing that did it is now under my control. Anya's expression didn't change, but her blue eyes bored into him. A long silence stretched between the 2 ships, thick with tension. He was making an audacious, impossible claim. She could blast him out of the sky for his arrogance. Instead, she gave a slow, dangerous smile. That's a very interesting word. You're either the biggest liar in the graveyard, or you're about to become the most important man in the galaxy. I'm not sure which is more dangerous. You're on your way to Epsilon 9, a suicide run for a simple scrapper. You're after something there. What is it? Kalen held her gaze. A heart for the ghost in the machine. Another pause. Anya leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping on the armrest. The decision was being made. The fate of their fledgling rebellion resting on her judgment. Finally, she spoke. All right, Kalen of the Stray Dog. You have my attention. You're going to get your prize from Epsilon 9, and my fleet is going to help you. But when you're done, you and I are going to have a much longer conversation, and you are going to show me this ghost of yours. Because if you're telling the truth, the game has just changed for all of us. The alliance was forged not in a treaty room, but in the cold, unforgiving void between warships. Kalen transmitted a condensed data packet to Anya's flagship, the Vulture. It contained a plan so audacious, so steeped in a precise understanding of Concordat operational security, that it bordered on suicidal genius. He laid out the station's patrol schedules, the blind spots in its sensor grids, and the precise timing of its shift changes details no ordinary scavenger could possibly know. He explained how they would use a captured Concordat transponder salvaged by Anya's crew months ago to spoof their identity. They wouldn't sneak past the station. They would fly right up to it, masquerading as a prize ship being delivered for decommissioning by Anya's fleet, who would pose as bounty hunters. It was a Trojan horse strategy for the space age. Anya was silent for a long time after receiving the data. On the comms screen, Kalen could see her turning to her own tactical officer, who was shaking his head in a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Nobody has ever gotten this close to Epsilon 9 schematics. Anya's voice finally came, stripped of its earlier bravado and replaced with a sharp, focused respect. This is more than good intel. This is a key. Where did you get it? Kalen's answer was simple and chilling. From a memory. The plan was set in motion. Jax, his hands flying across his console, slaved the stray dog systems to the Vulture's tractor beam. Anya's two other ships, the Jackal and the Hyena, took up flanking positions. They looked the part, a pack of predators bringing a piece of scrap to the abattoir. Station Epsilon 9 grew in their viewports, a monstrous thing of spinning rings and docking arms, all built around a central, glowing spire. This was the station's heart, the plasma cutting facility, powered by the micro-singularity Kalen needed. The station was a mechanized charnel house, its gantries and arms littered with the half-dissected husks of human ships, their registry numbers and names still visible like epitaphs on gravestones. Station Epsilon 9 Control. This is the bounty vessel Vulture. Anya's voice, now electronically altered to sound like a gruff male mercenary, broadcast towards the station, requesting docking clearance. We have a prize vessel for processing. The Stray Dog. Registry Juliet Tango 7. Captured violating the Accord buffer zone. The station's reply was cold and bureaucratic. Vulture, your transponder is recognized. Transmit prize vessel's reactor logs and manifest. Proceed to decommissioning bay, Gamma 4. A security detail will meet you. This was the first hurdle. Their reactor logs were forged, but a deep scan could reveal the illegal modifications and the precursor alloys woven into their hull. Kalen held his breath as Jax transmitted the doctored data. Seconds stretched into an eternity. He could feel the station's powerful sensor arrays sweeping over them, peeling back their defenses layer by layer. Then, the voice returned, unimpressed and bored. Logs received. Proceed to Gamma 4. Stay on the designated vector. Kalen exhaled slowly. The precursor baffle was working, scattering the most detailed parts of the scan and presenting the station's sensors with a ghost image that matched the forged data. They were in. Docking Bay Gamma 4 was a cavern of industrial horror. Automated claws and laser cutters hung from the ceiling like metallic insects. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone. As the stray dog was lowered onto a massive platform, a squad of Concordate security officers marched out to meet them, led by a stern-looking VR commander. His obsidian armor was polished to a mirror sheen, and he moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of military discipline. Anya and a dozen of her crew, all clad in the rough armor of mercenaries, disembarked from the Vulture. Kalen and Jax remained aboard their ship, playing the part of captured spacers. The Vithar commander addressed Anya. I am Commander Valerius. Your payment will be transferred once my technicians have verified the vessel's contents. My men will secure the prisoners. It was now or never. Anya gave a curt nod. As two guards moved toward the stray dog's ramp, she made a subtle hand gesture, in perfect, brutal synchronization. Her crew moved. A silenced pistol coughed, and the Vithar commander's head snapped back, a neat hole appearing in his visor. Before the other guards could even raise their weapons, Anya's crew descended on them, a whirlwind of vibro-blades and suppressed blaster fire. The fight was over in 30 seconds. It was a testament to their ruthless efficiency, honed by years of fighting a guerrilla war in the shadows. "Kalen, you're up," Anya yelled into her comm. Kalen and Jax were already moving. They sprinted from their ship, Kalen leading the way through the station's corridors with an unerring sense of direction. Guided by the mental blueprints the Nemesis had provided, Anya's team split, half of them planting explosive charges to seal the docking bay doors, the other half providing a moving shield around Kalen and Jax. Alarms began to blare across the station, a cacophony of sirens and synthesized Vthar commands. Their window of surprise had closed. The station was now a locked cage, and they were trapped inside with the wolves. They fought their way through sterile white corridors and vast engineering bays, the cold precision of concordant security clashing with the desperate ferocity of Anya's crew. Kalen was not a soldier, but he moved with a tactician's mind. "They'll try to box us in at the Junction 7 choke point," he'd shout, moments before a security team would appear exactly where he predicted. He saw their patterns, anticipated their flanking maneuvers, a result of the precursor combat logs playing out in the back of his mind. He was the brain. Anya and her hardened veterans were the bloody, brutal fists. Their target was the central spire, the housing for the power regulator. They reached the base of the spire to find it sealed by a massive blast door, guarded by 2 automated heavy plasma turrets. The turrets swiveled towards them and opened fire. "Jax." The door, everyone else. "Give him cover," Anya screamed over the roar of plasma. While her crew laid down a storm of suppressing fire, Jax frantically worked on a nearby control panel, his fingers a blur as he bypassed security lockouts. Kalen, meanwhile, wasn't hiding. He was watching the turret's firing sequence. He saw the rhythm, the slight delay as their targeting capacitors recharged. Now he yelled, and in that split-second delay, 2 of Anya's crew fired micro-grenades that struck the turret's unshielded power conduits. The turrets exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal. At the same moment, Jax slammed a fist on the panel. "I'm in, it's open." The room behind the door was the heart of the station. In the center, suspended in a web of magnetic containment fields, was a shimmering sphere of energy, no larger than a man's fist, the microsingularity. Feeding power from it to the rest of the station was a complex device of crystalline arrays and humming conduits, the power regulation unit. It was a massive piece of equipment, the size of a small shuttle. "We're not carrying that out of here," Jax said, his face grim. "We don't have to," Kalen replied, pulling a set of specialized tools from his pack. "We just need the primary control module and the catalyst injector. I can bypass the rest." While Anya's crew set up a defensive perimeter at the doorway, holding back waves of concordant security, Kalen and Jax began the delicate, high-stakes surgery on the regulator. Plasma bolts seared the air around them. 2 of Anya's crew fell. Their armor breached. The firefight was becoming untenable. "Kalen," how much longer, Anya yelled, firing a fresh power pack into her rifle. "Almost there," Kalen shouted back. He carefully detached the final conduit, holding the gleaming, cylindrical control module in his hands. It hummed with immense contained power. "Got it. Let's go." Their escape was a desperate, fighting retreat. They were heavily outnumbered, their ammunition running low. They were falling back towards the docking bay when their path was cut off by a squad of Concordat enforcers. Elite soldiers in heavy powered armor. They were trapped. "Well, kid," Jax panted, leaning against a bulkhead. It was a good run. But Kalen was looking past the enforcers, his eyes fixed on the massive plasma cutters used for decommissioning ships. A desperate idea, born from the Nemesis's tactical mind, took shape. Anya, the main breaker for the cutting arms, overloaded. Anya's eyes widened as she understood. She and two of her remaining crew provided covering fire, while another sprinted for a large power junction on the wall. The Concordat enforcers advanced, their weapons raised for the final kill, just as they were about to fire. Anya's crewmen slammed a detonite charge onto the breaker. The station's lights flickered wildly. The huge, multi-jointed cutting arms, which had been dormant, suddenly spasmed to life, their plasma emitters firing uncontrollably. A massive blue-white beam of pure energy, designed to slice through dreadnought hulls, scythed through the corridor. It vaporized the enforcer squad in a single, silent flash. The arm swung back, carving a molten canyon through the station wall, creating a new, unintentional exit out into the void of the docking bay. "That's our ride," Anya screamed. One by one, they leaped through the burning hole, their mag boots clamping onto the outer hull of the Vulture, with Kalen, Jax, and the precious module safely aboard. Anya's flagship detached from the dying station and blasted its way out of the bay, its cannons blazing. They left Station Epsilon 9 in flames, a gaping wound torn in its side, its alarm still screaming into the silent void. They had the heart, but now the entire Concordat knew that the ghosts in their graveyard were real, and they had just declared war. The journey back to the Nemesis was a high-speed, nerve-shredding race against time. Alarms blared across the bridge of the Vulture as their sensors painted a grim picture. Concordat response fleets were materializing at jump points all across the sector, converging on the smoking ruin of Epsilon 9 like antibodies rushing to a wound. The local space was becoming a cage, and the bars were closing fast. Kalen stood beside Anya at the main tactical display, the stolen power regulation module secured in a crash case at his feet. His mind was a whirlwind of activity, the precursor knowledge overlaying his own instincts, allowing him to process the flood of tactical data with a chilling clarity. He saw not just ship vectors and weapon ranges, but the probable lines of attack, the logical choke points the Concordat would establish. He was a musician hearing not just the notes, but the entire symphony of the coming battle. "They're trying to pen us in against the Tartarus gravity well," Kalen stated, his voice cutting through the tense hum of the bridge. He pointed to a series of jump point vectors on the holo display. 3 battle groups. The lead one, under Admiral Vorlag, is known for pincer movements. They'll try to force us into a direct confrontation while their flanking wings cut off our escape. Anya's knuckles were white where she gripped the command chair's armrest. Her fleet was fast and agile, but they were pirates and scavengers, not a disciplined navy. They were outmatched in firepower, armor, and numbers. A direct engagement with a Concordat battle group was suicide. "We can't outrun them, and we can't outfight them," she said, her voice a low growl of frustration. "What's your ghost telling you to do?" Kalen's eyes were distant for a moment, sifting through the ancient memories that were now a part of him. He saw a similar scenario from a forgotten war, A battle fought in the accretion disk of a black hole, where a smaller, faster fleet had used gravitational anomalies to outmaneuver a numerically superior foe. "We don't run from them," he said, turning back to Anya, his gaze sharp and certain. "We run through them. We use the graveyard. It's our home turf. Vorlag's fleet will be cautious. Their tactics are designed for open space engagements. The chaos of the debris fields will foul their advanced sensors and break their formations." He began to plot a new course on the tactical map, a reckless, almost insane vector that led directly through the Whispering Labyrinth, the same chaotic sector where he had first found the Nemesis. "We lead them on a chase. We separate the flagship from its support wings, and we bleed them, one ship at a time." It was a guerrilla war doctrine applied to starship combat, a strategy of 1,000 cuts. It was a plan that relied on flawless piloting, intimate knowledge of the terrain, and a commander who was willing to gamble everything on a single, decisive moment. Anya looked at the proposed course, then at Kaelin, and then at her hardened crew. She saw the grim determination in their eyes. They were cornered rats, and cornered rats bite back. She gave a sharp, predatory grin. "All right, Kaelin, let's show these concordant bastards how we dance in the boneyard. All ships, slave your nav computers to the Vulture. Prepare for high-G maneuvers. We're going to give Admiral Vorlog a headache he'll never forget." The chase was a ballet of fire and steel amidst the silent tombs of fallen empires. Anya's fleet, guided by Kaelin's precursor-enhanced navigation, moved like a phantom through the graveyard. They skimmed the surfaces of shattered dreadnoughts, using their massive hulls as sensor cover. They darted through the skeletal remains of ancient space stations, their engines flaring for only moments before going cold again. They were ghosts, a flicker on the Concordate's long-range sensors one moment, gone the next. Admiral Vorlag, aboard his flagship the Iron Hand, grew increasingly frustrated. His perfectly ordered formations were useless in this metallic jungle. His ships were forced to spread out, to hunt in pairs. Their lines of communication and support stretched thin. It was exactly what Kaelin had predicted. The first kill belonged to the Jackal. It lay in wait inside the hollowed-out engine nacelle of a half-mile-long Titan. As a lone Concordate destroyer passed by, its sensors focused on a ghost signal Kaelin had projected miles away. The Jackal powered up, emerged from its hiding place, and unleashed a full spread of plasma torpedoes at the destroyer's exposed rear. The Concordate ship's shields flared and died, and a series of secondary explosions tore it apart from the inside. Before the Iron Hand could even vector a response, the Jackal was gone, vanished back into the metallic fog. One by one, they struck. Anya in the Vulture led a daring strafing run on a pair of frigates, her ship's cannons gutting one while the Hyena crippled the other, leaving it adrift for its crew to suffocate in the cold dark. They were a pack of wolves, isolating the weakest members of the herd and tearing them to shreds. But Vorlog was no fool. He began to adapt, pulling his ships into a tighter, more defensive formation, and using wide-spectrum energy pulses to try and flush them out. The noose was tightening again. "He's learning." Jax's voice crackled over the comm from the stray dog, which was still attached to the Vulture. "We can't keep this up forever. We're running low on torpedoes, and our engines are overheating." "We don't have to," Kaelin replied, his focus entirely on the tactical map. "We're almost there." He pointed to a position on the map. It was the Nemesis. "Vorlog has been chasing us, but he thinks he's hurting us. He's about to push us into what he believes is a dead end, a pocket of space with no escape. He doesn't know what's waiting for him there. They made their final, desperate run. The Vulture took a glancing blow from a plasma cannon, the port side of the ship glowing cherry red. Alarms screamed, but Anya's crew fought the fires, their discipline holding firm. They broke through the last concordate picket line and soared into the clear, empty space where the precursor ship lay in wait, a mountain of blackness against the stars. As planned, Vorlag's fleet followed them out of the debris field. Seeing his prey cornered, he brought his entire remaining battle group into a classic encirclement formation. On the bridge of the Iron Hand, his Vithar officers allowed themselves a moment of triumph. "Admiral," his second-in-command reported, "the pirate fleet is cornered. Their energy readings are fluctuating. Their ships are damaged. They have nowhere left to run." "Prepare to fire on my command," Vorlag ordered, his voice resonating with cold satisfaction. "I want their leader taken alive. She will answer for her crimes." But their triumph was short-lived. A new energy signature suddenly bloomed on their screens, one so massive, so powerful, it dwarfed Vorlag's entire fleet. It was coming from the colossal derelict that had been nothing more than a piece of background scenery. "Kalen, now's the time," Anya yelled. The Vulture maneuvered alongside the Nemesis, its tractor beam disengaging from the stray dog. Under Kalen's precise guidance, Jax piloted their small hauler back into the Leviathan's hangar bay. Kalen and Jax, carrying the heavily shielded module, sprinted from their ship, their mag boots clanging on the deck. They didn't head for the bridge this time. Kalen led Jax deep into the ship's interior, to a chamber that housed the main engineering control nexus. The chamber was a cathedral of dormant technology. In the center was a massive, crystalline interface, the connection point to the ship's heart. "Plug it in," Kalen yelled over the thrum of the station's emergency power. Jax, with a mechanic's practiced ease, began to connect the stolen module to the precursor interface, his tools moving in a blur as he adapted the concordant technology to the alien systems. Outside, Vorlag watched in stunned silence as the derelict began to wake up. Lines of faint silver light traced across its hull, forming intricate, geometric patterns. A low hum resonated through space itself, a vibration that his ship's sensors struggled to interpret. "What is that thing?" he demanded. "Identify that vessel." The answer came not from his crew, but from the Nemesis itself. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Kalen placed his hand on a smaller, auxiliary control pedestal. He wasn't on the command throne. He didn't need its full power. He just needed to direct the energy that Jax was now feeding into the system. The voice returned to his mind. Clearer this time. Stronger. Reactor ignition sequence initiated. Power levels rising. All systems nominal. A wave of energy. Not a weapon, but a pure statement of power. Washed over the concordant fleet. Their shields flickered and overloaded. Their sensor screens turned to static. A message appeared on the Iron Hand's main view screen, not in concordant script, but in the universal language of mathematics, a string of prime numbers that resolved itself into a single, terrifying image, a schematic of the Nemesis. Its weapon systems now glowing with active power. A new voice, calm and clear, broadcast on all frequencies. It was Kalen's. "Admiral Vorlag, my name is Kalen. For 100 years, my people have been caged, stripped of our rights, and left to rot in your boneyard. Today, that ends. You are trespassing in human territory. You have 10 seconds to order your fleet to stand down and withdraw. If you do not comply, I will not destroy your ships. I will erase them." The 10 seconds Kalen offered stretched into an eternity, a pocket of silent, shivering tension in the heart of the graveyard. On the bridge of the Iron Hand, Admiral Vorlag stared at the image of the nemesis on his view screen, the calm human voice echoing in the sudden quiet. His Vithar pride, a thing of ancient lineage and martial honor, warred with the primal, undeniable evidence of his senses. He had just witnessed a single, derelict vessel awaken and disable his entire fleet's sensor arrays with a casual shrug of power. He had lost a third of his ships to a pack of human scavengers who moved like phantoms. Every tactical instinct screamed that this was an unwinnable fight against a foe operating on a different plane of existence. But to retreat, to heed the ultimatum of a human, a species his people had deemed little more than clever vermin, was a dishonor worse than death. His jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck cording. He looked at his tactical officer, whose own face was a mask of disciplined fear. Vorlag's voice, when it came, was not a shout, but a low, venomous command that cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "All ships, target that anomaly. Fire everything. Annihilate it." The Concordia fleet responded with the synchronized fury of a wounded beast. 100 warships, from the mighty Iron Hand down to the smallest surviving destroyer, unleashed a symphony of destruction. Torrents of white-hot plasma, swarms of shield-piercing missiles, and volleys of hypervelocity tungsten slugs converged on the nemesis. It was a storm of firepower that could have scoured the surface of a continent, a wave of pure destructive energy that lit up the graveyard, casting the skeletons of ancient ships in stark, flickering relief. The barrage struck the nemesis not with a clang of metal or the flare of energy shields, but with a profound and unsettling silence. The plasma bolts washed over the seamless black hull and were simply absorbed, their incandescent energy vanishing into the void-like material as if they had never been. The missiles, their guidance systems fried by the ship's passive energy field, either detonated harmlessly in space or were caught by localized gravitic eddies that spun them away. The kinetic slugs, the last resort of brute force, flattened against the hull and were reduced to dust. Their immense momentum completely negated. The nemesis simply hung in space, unmoving, unmarked. A god shrugging off the prayers of insects on its bridge. Kalen felt the impacts not as jolts, but as whispers of data flowing through the command pedestal. Energy weapons at 34% of theoretical hull tolerance. Kinetic impacts negligible. The voice in his head was calm, analytical. The ship did not feel the attack as a threat, but merely as an environmental condition. "They're not listening," he said. His voice broadcast across the shared comm channel with Anya's fleet. Anya's reply was laced with grim satisfaction. "Prideful bastards never do." "What's the call?" "Kalen, do we let the ghost off its leash?" Kalen's gaze was fixed on the tactical display. He saw the concordant ships, their formations tight, their discipline absolute even in the face of the impossible. They were soldiers following orders, men and women trapped in the same cage of pride and doctrine as their admiral. Annihilating them would be easy. It would also be a massacre. "No," he said, a new authority hardening his tone. "We're not butchers. We're going to teach them a lesson." He closed his eyes, focusing his will. He didn't reach for the void lance. He reached for a different system, one designed not for destruction, but for control. The Nemesis resonated with a new frequency, a deep thrum that vibrated in the very bones of every crewman in the opposing fleet. It emitted a targeted, cascading, gravitic pulse. It was not an explosion. It was a wave of precisely calculated force that washed over the Concordate fleet. For the smaller destroyers and frigates, it was like hitting a wall in space-time. Their artificial gravity systems failed, sending crews tumbling through their own ships. Their engine cores overloaded as their containment fields buckled, one by one. More than half of Vorlag's fleet went dark, their lights flickering out as they were left powerless and adrift, their crews alive but utterly defeated. The larger cruisers and the flagship itself, with their more powerful systems, weathered the pulse, but they were staggered, their formations shattered. "Anya, now," Kalen commanded. "The cripples are yours. Disable, don't destroy. I want prisoners, not corpses." Anya's fleet, which had been holding back in the shadow of the Nemesis, roared to life. They fell upon the disabled Concordate ships with a savage, practiced efficiency. They fired ion cannons that fried weapon systems and tractor beams that clamped onto drifting hulls. It was no longer a battle. It was a salvage operation. The scavengers of the graveyard claiming the biggest prize of their lives. Admiral Vorlag watched in apoplectic rage as his fleet was dismantled around him. His command was in chaos. He had fired his best shot, and it had failed to leave a scratch. His fleet was being picked apart. All that was left was his pride and his dreadnought. "All remaining power to the forward cannon," he snarled. "Bring us about. We will ram that abomination if we have to, but we will leave our mark." The Iron Hand, a vessel of war over 2 kilometers long, began to turn, its massive main gun glowing as it charged for a final point-blank shot. On the bridge of the Nemesis, the voice spoke in Kalen's mind. Threat analysis Class A dreadnought preparing for critical energy discharge at lethal proximity. Optimal response. Total target annihilation. The Void Lance was ready. The simplest, most efficient solution. It was a tempting thought. One shot, and it would all be over. But Kalen saw the faces of the men he had scavenged with, the desperation in Jax's eyes, the fire in Anya's. They had fought for a chance to live, not for the power to kill without consequence. He had to be better than the Concordate. He had to be better than the power he now wielded. He focused, pushing past the cold logic of the ship, imposing his own will, his own humanity, on its ancient, alien systems. He commanded the Void Lance, but he gave it a new, impossible instruction. He would use it as a surgeon's scalpel, not a butcher's cleaver. The circle of absolute blackness opened on the Nemesis's hull. As the Iron Hand's cannon fired, a lance of non-light erupted. It did not strike the dreadnought's bridge or its reactor core. Instead, it moved with a speed and precision that defied physics. It made 3 distinct, instantaneous passes. The first sliced off the entire forward cannon assembly, the massive weapon floating away, inert and powerless. The second sheared through the ship's primary engine blocks, silencing them forever. The third delicately filleted the vessel, cutting away its lateral weapon batteries and missile pods, leaving them to drift harmlessly in space. The Iron Hand was left utterly castrated, its teeth and claws removed in a single, silent, terrifyingly elegant gesture. The battle was over. In the ensuing silence, Kalen opened a channel again. this time broadcasting not just to the crippled fleet, but on a wide band aimed at the whole of the Concordat. This is Kalen of the vessel Nemesis. Today, your fleet was defeated, not by a ghost or a legend, but by the humanity you sought to discard. We are the scavengers you left to rot in your graveyard. We are the children of the worlds you blockaded, and we are no longer your prisoners. This weapon, this ship, is now the guardian of our freedom. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek revenge. We seek justice. From this day forward, the Tartarus system and the surrounding sectors are under human protection. The technological limitation accords are hereby declared void. Any Concordat vessel entering this territory without permission will be disarmed, its crew interned, and its ship added to our boneyard. Go home. Tell your Senate that the age of humanity's submission is over. A new age has begun. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy convulsed. The Concordat Senate fractured, unable to form a coherent response to the impossible event. Some factions called for an all-out war, a holy crusade to destroy the human heresy. Others, seeing the footage from the Iron Hand's surviving data recorders, the silent, effortless defeat of their greatest admiral, sued for peace. Terrified of provoking the ghost in the machine, humanity, for the first time in a century, was united. Ships from a dozen forgotten colonies and hidden outposts made their way to Tartarus 7, now the capital of a fledgling human confederation. Anya, Jax, and Kalen formed a new ruling council, a triumvirate of the Pirate Queen, the Master Engineer, and the reluctant leader who spoke with the voice of a god, on the bridge of the Nemesis, which now stood silent vigil in orbit over the rust-red world of his birth. Kalen looked out at the stars. They were no longer a ceiling, but a horizon. The voice of the ship was quiet now, a constant, reassuring presence in the back of his mind. He had won them their freedom, but the weight of that victory was heavier than any salvage metal he had ever hauled. He had started a fire that would reshape the galaxy, and he knew that the fight was far from over. But as he watched the stray dog, now a museum piece preserved in the main hangar, and saw new, human-designed ships taking flight from the planet below, he felt something he hadn't felt since he was a child sifting through the dust hope. The children of the graveyard had risen, and they would never be chained again.